The librarian has no eyes. They say knowledge is power, but no one ever warns you about the cost. My name is Ezra, and until 6 months ago, I was a postgraduate researcher specializing in obscure languages and religious texts, mainly dead ones. I lived a quiet life, surrounded by ink, vellum, and the occasional bout of existential dread. That was before Marion vanished. My sister, my only family, my best friend. We were both students of strange things, though she had always taken her studies further. Marion believed that real truth was hidden, buried deep beneath layers of metaphor and myth, guarded by those who feared what it could unleash. She called me the rational one. Maybe I was. Maybe that's why I'm still alive. The last time I saw her, she was scribbling madly into her field journal. We met in our usual cafe near the campus, and she looked gaunt, her skin pale and papery, like she hadn't slept in days. She had been researching a rumored collection of pre-Christian texts said to exist somewhere under the university, the underground library, as she'd begun calling it. "I found something," she whispered, leaning close, glancing over her shoulder, like someone might be listening. Something that shouldn't exist. I remember the way her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, diagrams and sigils I didn't recognize sketched in the margins. That night, she vanished. No trace, no phone activity, no usage of her keycards or emails. Her apartment was untouched. The police filed it under voluntary disappearance. But I knew better, and I knew where to start looking. I spent months digging through her notes, deciphering her journal, reconstructing her descent into obsession. She had been following rumors, tracking down former faculty and fringe occultists who spoke of a library hidden beneath the university's foundations, a place where the books didn't collect dust but whispered when you passed by. Most dismissed her theories, but one name came up repeatedly: Professor Anson Bell. Anson Bell had retired before I joined the university, an expert in forbidden manuscripts. His career ended abruptly after a scandal involving missing rare books. No charges were filed. He disappeared from public life. But not completely. After weeks of searching, I found him in a care home an hour outside the city, tucked away in a wing that smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. His body was withered, but his eyes were sharp. "You're Marion's brother," he said before I even introduced myself. I froze. "You knew her?" "She found it, didn't she?" he murmured, his voice barely above a breath. "She found the librarian." "What are you talking about?" He looked past me, toward a window covered by gauzy curtains. "It's not a place. It's a presence. It waits. It listens. And it always remembers a debt." I tried to press him, but he began to weep, thin tears cutting lines through his paper-dry skin. The nurses made me leave. 3 nights later, I found the entrance. There was no fanfare, no mystical lock. Just a rusted, iron-bound door behind a forgotten maintenance corridor deep within the sub-basement of the university's oldest building. Marion's notes had described it in maddening detail, and yet I still hesitated with my hand on the latch. Something in the air felt wrong thick, like breathing molasses. I went in. The stairs descended far deeper than should have been structurally possible. I lost count of the steps after 5 minutes. The walls were lined with decaying shelves, most empty, but some housing volumes that looked centuries old. The air was dry, yet I felt moisture clinging to my skin. There was no sound, no pipes, no dripping, no electricity, just silence. And then I heard the whisper, "Reader." It came from behind me, but when I turned, no one was there. I called out, my voice pathetically small in that vast, lightless corridor. A figure stepped from the shadows. Tall, cloaked in something that looked like the absence of color fabric that drank in the dim light from my flashlight. But it was the face, or lack thereof, that stole my breath. Where eyes should have been, there were only smooth hollows, not sunken. Not empty sockets, just nothing. Like someone had pressed their thumbs into clay and left no indent. "I seek knowledge," I managed. It tilted its head, and I could feel it examining me despite its eyeless face. "You carry the debt of another," it said. "My sister." It reached into the folds of its robes and pulled free a small book bound in grey leather, My name was written across it, in what looked like dried blood. Payment is due. I should have run, I should have burned it all, but I nodded. I took the book. The moment my fingers touched the leather, my vision twisted. I wasn't in the corridor anymore. I stood in a cathedral of books, each volume chained to iron pillars, whispering in a dozen languages I didn't recognize. Some screamed, others wept. My head felt like it was splitting open, but the librarian stood at my side, unmoving. "This is the archive," it said. "All knowledge has a cost. Choose wisely." What happened to Marion? It gestured, and a passage opened between shelves, flanked by rows of empty chairs that faced a small reading desk. There, I saw her. She was slumped over an open book, her hair long and unkempt, her fingers bleeding ink onto the pages. Her lips moved soundlessly, eyes wild with recognition and madness. "Marion!" She didn't react. "She reads," the librarian said. "She asked questions no one should ask. She opened a book that could not be closed. That is her payment." I ran toward her, but the air thickened into glass. I struck it, screaming. She never looked up. "I'll take her place," I begged. The librarian tilted its head again. "No, she pays her debt. You will pay yours." The cathedral collapsed around me. I woke on the cold stone floor just beyond the library entrance. The door behind me had sealed. My hands were empty. I stumbled home. For weeks, I was plagued with dreams Marion screaming from inside burning pages, the librarian whispering nonsense in dead tongues. But worst of all were the visions I had when I was awake. When I touched a bookany book, I knew what it cost to write. Every cut, every betrayal, every price the author paid just to finish a paragraph. I couldn't read anymore, not without feeling them bleed. That was the librarian's gift. That was my payment. And it wasn't done with me. I stopped going outside. People began to notice my colleagues, the department, even my few friends. I told them I was sick. That was true, in a way. There was something wrong with me now, something that made my skin itch and my sleep shallow. I heard voices in the white space between sentences. I felt eyes on my back when I walked by shelves. And books, I couldn't read them anymore. It started innocently enough. I'd glance at a spine, and instead of a title, I'd see a sentencia memory, a loss, a scream. If I dared to open one, it was worse. The ink moved, melted, formed stories, never meant to be told. A children's book I once loved as a kid began weeping black tears as I flipped through it. The pages whispered, "Help me," over and over again in Marion's voice. Then, people started dying. The first was Professor Legrand. She was a tenured linguist, a good woman. I had gone to her hoping to cross-reference a phrase from Marion's notes, something that kept repeating in my dreams. Lex mentorium in oculis absconditus. The law of the teacher in hidden eyes, she translated, frowning. That's not a real phrase in any Latin dialect I know. I didn't tell her where it came from. 3 days later, she was found in her offices lumped at her desk with her eyes missing. Not gouged, removed cleanly, no blood, no sign of trauma. The sockets were smooth and empty, as if she'd never had eyes at all, just like the librarian. I knew then it had followed me back. I stayed away from people after that, stopped asking questions, but the dreams persisted, and worse, the whispering grew louder. Sometimes it wasn't in my head. Sometimes it came from beneath the floorboards. Reader, paiement due. One night, I snapped and tore apart every book in my apartment. Textbooks, journals, even Marion's notes. I burned them in the bathtub, but when I returned to the living room, they were back. Every single one, shelved neatly, waiting. And at the center of the coffee table sat the grey leather book with my name on it. I tried to take it to the university's archive. I thought maybe I could hide it, bury it under lead or concrete, anything to keep it out of my sight. But the archivist, Elias Cohn, insisted on inspecting it before accepting it into the vault. "I've never seen leather like this," he murmured, tracing the spine. "Smells, faintly like myrrh and iron." He opened the cover. I shouted for him to stop, but it was too late. His eyes glazed over, and he began to read aloud not words, but sounds, guttural, low, ancient syllables that vibrated the walls. Lights flickered, the air chilled. The temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged. And then he screamed. He collapsed backward, clawing at his chest. His fingernails tore into his own ribs as he gasped. "He's watching. She's already." Blood foamed from his mouth. The lights died. When I flicked on my phone flashlight, the book was gone. So was Elias. No one believed me. The university claimed Elias had a mental breakdown and fled. The security footage was corrupted. My name was flagged in an internal review, and I was asked to take a leave of absence. But I knew. I had brought it back with me. I returned to the underground door. It wasn't there. The corridor was still there, dusty, damp where the rusted door had once been. There was only concrete wall. No seams, no cracks, like it had never existed. Desperate, I broke into Marian's apartment. I needed her journal, the real one, the one I had hidden after her disappearance. I needed a way back. When I entered, the air was heavy with mold. Dust coated every surface. The windows were smeared with condensation, though the air was dry. I moved quickly, rifling through her bookshelves, trying to remember where I had stashed the journal. Then I saw the mirror. It hung above her writing desk, covered with a sheer cloth. I hadn't remembered it being there before. The surface beneath the cloth moved slightly, like water. I pulled the cloth away. The mirror didn't reflect me. Instead, it showed the underground library. A dim corridor stretching into shadows, shelves full of chained books, and the librarian standing at the far end, unmoving, its eyeless face tilted in my direction. I stumbled back, dropping the cloth. The mirror's surface shimmered, and a word etched itself across the glass. Debt. And then, behind me, I heard Marian's voice. "Ezra, why did you come back?" She stood in the doorway to her bedroom, barefoot, her eyes hollow and distant. Her lips moved slowly, as if unused to speaking. "Marian," I whispered. "You weren't supposed to find it. You disappeared. I had to. You shouldn't have opened it." She stepped forward. I could see that her fingers were stained with ink, the nails cracked, the skin bruised. She looked, used, worn out, as though her body was a second-hand garment stretched too thin. "I saw too much," she said. "Asked too much. You can come home. We'll fix this." Marian shook her head. "It won't let me go." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, folded and worn. She pressed it into my hand. Only one way left. Before I could speak, she walked back into the bedroom and shut the door. I ran after her. The room was empty. The windows were locked from inside, the bed untouched. No one had been in there for months. But the note in my hand was real. It had only 2 lines. "The door will open again if you give it a name. But you cannot name the librarian." That night, the grey book returned. It was on my pillow when I woke up, unopened. No matter how far I threw it, it reappeared. When I burned it, the ashes formed the shape of a door. When I buried it, the earth turned to black parchment beneath my fingers. I didn't sleep for days. The mirror in Marian's apartment haunted me. I went back, night after night, watching as the reflection changed, sometimes showing the librarian pacing, other times showing Marian at the desk, bleeding words into books I could never read. And always, always that word on the glass, debt. I was being invited back, but I didn't know how to name it. Not yet. So I did something reckless. I brought someone with me. His name was Rowan, a fellow researcher, one of the few people who hadn't abandoned me after Marian's disappearance. I told him everything. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he asked to see it. "The mirror, the door, the book," he said. "I want to see." He was smarter than me, arrogant, curious. He didn't believe in curses or gods. That made him the perfect offering. We stood before the mirror together. The librarian stared back at us. Rowan's mouth twisted into a grin. "I name you," he said, "Anaraxoth." The mirror shattered. The door opened, and the floor swallowed him whole. One moment he was beside me. The next, He was screaming as the ground split open and tendrils of ink dragged him down into the dark. His fingernails left trails on the hardwood before his voice cut off. In the mirror, I saw the librarian tilt its head, and for the first time, it smiled. That night, I dreamed of Rowan's face flayed open, each layer of flesh etched with unreadable script. He blinked, and behind his eyes were pages. He spoke, and the sound was paper tearing. I woke to blood on my hands. Not mine. The grey book sat open on my chest, a new entry inked inside. Rowan Alcott, payment accepted. And beneath it, my name again. Ezra March, debt remains. The morning after Rowan vanished, I walked to the university barefoot, still in the same clothes from the night before, the wind slicing through me like razors. I don't remember crossing streets. I don't remember eating. All I knew was that the book, the grey one with my name in dried blood, was still in my hands, open now, waiting for more. I went straight to the central library and locked myself in one of the basement study rooms. I sat at the desk and stared at the pages, hoping somehow, impossibly, that I could undo what had happened, that I could find Marion, that I could get Rowan back. Instead, the book wrote back. Words bled onto the page, letter by letter. Knowledge given, payment due. I tried to tear it up. The pages screamed when I touched them. I could feel the fibers resisting, writhing like muscle under skin. My fingertips bled ink instead of blood. I slammed the book shut. It laughed. A dry, crackling laugh, like fire-licking old parchment. The next death came 2 days later. I had gone to a bookstore in the city, hoping to speak with an old friend of Marianne's, a woman named Claudia, who once shared an apartment with her during their undergrad years. Claudia was reclusive but brilliant. She knew more about grimoires and apocryphal texts than anyone I'd met. If anyone could help me name the Librarianto sever the bond, it would be her. Claudia didn't answer my calls, so I showed up at the shop unannounced. The door was ajar. Inside, the lights were off. The floor creaked beneath my feet, and the heavy smell of ink and dust hit me like a memory. I called her name. No answer. I moved toward the back, where the rare books were shelved in glass cases, and that's when I saw the ink pooling under the door of her office. It wasn't just spilled ink. It was thick, pulsing, alive. I opened the door. She was slumped in her chair, her face buried in a book. Or rather, what had once been her face now, nothing more than blank vellum, as if her skin had been stretched smooth and erased. Her eyes were missing, her mouth sealed, ink poured from her ears. In her lap sat the grey book. My name was no longer the only one inside. Claudia Ruiz, payment accepted. I ran. I left the shop, barely able to see through the tears. I threw the grey book into the nearest sewer grate and didn't look back. But that night, it returned. It was waiting for me in my apartment, resting gently on my pillow like a sleeping cat. The pages fluttered open without wind. New ink swirled across the parchment like a film developing. You cannot reject the contract. You cannot name the librarian. You can only pay. I screamed until my voice broke. I tore through my apartment, smashing mirrors, overturning shelves. The lights flickered. My shadow stretched toward the wall and didn't move when I did. And then it spoke. Not the book. Not the librarian. My shadow. It turned its head and faced me. You brought him back. The next morning, I left the city. I took nothing but Marian's original journal, a few changes of clothes, and a prepaid phone. I drove for hours, through endless grey roads, until I reached the small lakeside town where Marian and I spent our childhood summers. The cabin was still there. Empty, forgotten, safe. I tried to live like nothing had happened. For a time, I succeeded. There were no books in the cabin, only old fishing gear and broken radios. No mirrors, no reflections. I spent my days fishing on the lake, my nights staring into the fire, trying not to dream. But the silence had a shape, and it was watching. One night, I awoke to the sound of pages turning. The grey book was on the floor beside my bed. I hadn't brought it. I hadn't touched it in weeks. But there it was, open again. A name for a name. A life for a life. It pulsed, like a heart. I stood, backed into the far wall, staring at it as if it were a venomous snake. Then I saw the newest entry. Marion March. Payment still in progress. Still? She was alive. Somewhere some part of her still existed within that endless library. Still reading, still paying, unless someone took her place. I knew what it wanted. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I drove back to the city. There was one person who might understand, who might help me break the contract, or at least finish it on my terms. Professor Anson Bell. I returned to the care home. The nurses told me he hadn't had a visitor in weeks, that he no longer spoke. But when I entered his room, he was waiting. His eyes were gone. Not empty, just gone. Smooth skin where they should have been. I dreamed of you, he whispered. I sat beside him. You served the librarian once. He nodded. You named it, didn't you? Another nod. But not completely. You never can. Why not? Because names give form, he said. And it doesn't want form, it wants hunger. I placed the grey book on his lap. It opened without my help. He didn't flinch. Will you help me save her? He smiled. No, but I'll help you choose the right payment. We spent the night together, me, Anson Bell, and the book. He taught me how to ask the right questions, how to offer the correct sacrifice, how to close a contract with the librarian without tearing reality apart. It's like bloodletting, he muttered, as his fingers drew a sigil across the cabin floor in salt and iron filings. You have to bleed the rot out, or it consumes the host. He showed me the ritual, the invocation, and then he gave me a knife. You'll need to make a cut, not to flesh, to truth. The next night, the mirror appeared again. On the wall of the cabin, hanging in a place I hadn't seen before, it pulsed with heat. The word depth shimmered across the surface. I stepped close. Inside, the librarian waited. Marion sat in the chair. Her eyes were gone now, her lips stitched shut, but she still turned pages endlessly, reading with her fingers, bleeding ink. I held the knife. I spoke the words Anson taught me. A name for a name, a life for a life. Let her go. Take me. The mirror shuddered. The book opened on its own. A new name began to write itself. Ezra March, payment pending. And then just below it, Marion March, payment suspended. I smiled. It was working. But then the mirror cracked, and the librarian stepped through. It did not walk. It unfolded. It stretched from the glass like smoke finding shape, its robes a storm of screaming pages, its face still eyeless, but now it had something else. A mouth. It had never spoken aloud before. Its voice hit me like thunder wrapped in ice. You presume to barter? I offer myself. You presume to command. I name you. I tried, but the words stuck in my throat. An invisible hand clamped over my mouth. You presume, it whispered, too much. The fire died. The cabin groaned. I fell to my knees. And then, from behind me, I heard Anson Bell begin to chant. Anson Bell's voice rose in cadence, louder than I thought his withered lungs could manage. Each word sounded like stone grinding against stone, the syllables thick with age and intention. The librarian turned toward him not hurriedly, not angrily, but with slow inevitability, like a tree shifting towards sunlight. I felt the grip around my mouth ease, the weight on my back lifted. Keep going, I shouted. Anson's voice cracked, but he pressed on, drawing an invisible line in the air with a shaking finger. I recognized the pattern, a binding sigil, one that forced a name to form shape to become knowable. But the librarian wasn't trying to stop him. It was smiling. Not with joy, not even malice. With anticipation. As Anson reached the final word, the librarian raised a hand. Its robe opened along the seam of its arm, revealing not flesh, but thousands of mouths sewn into parchment. Each one whispered a different voice, some calling out Anson's name. He stuttered. "No, finish it!" I screamed. Anson turned to me. There were tears in his eyeless face. "I'm sorry," he said. "I just remembered. The final word. It's mine." The parchment-mouth arm unfurled. Tendrils shot toward him, wrapping around his throat and chest. He didn't scream. He only whispered one last thing before he was pulled apart like brittle paper. "Buy her time." And then he was gone. The sigil he drew still glowed in the air for a few more seconds before fading. I was alone with the librarian. Marian's reflection appeared in the mirror once more. She was curled into herself now, thin and pale, her fingers fused into the book's spine. Her mouth unsewed itself slowly, black thread wriggling like worms as it fell free. She met my eyes. "Don't try again," she mouthed. The librarian turned back to me. "You owe." "I know. No more names, only silence." "I accept." The grey book floated between us. Its pages flipped wildly, faster than I could follow, each one screaming as it turned. Then they stopped. Ezra March. Final payment initiated. The ink bled through the page, forming a door. Without another word, I stepped through. It was not like last time. The underground library was gone. In its place was a white expanse blinding, infinite. The air smelled like burnt feathers and candle smoke. There were no shelves, no walls, only books. Suspended in the air, spinning in slow circles. In the center, the librarian waited. It opened its robe and gestured. A chair appeared behind me, a desk in front, and a book on the desk. It was blank. "Write," it said. "With what?" "Blood." I sat. I held out my hand. A small blade appeared beside the book, clean and ceremonial. I picked it up and drew it across my palm. The pain was sharp, immediate. The blood pooled into the grooves of the blank page, forming words before I even thought of them. My memories. Each word cost a part of me. My name. My mother's face. The smell of the lake house. Marian's laugh. The first time I read by flashlight under the covers. Gone, bleeding onto the page, line by line. The librarian watched. It didn't need my soul. It wanted my story. I don't know how long I wrote. Time passed differently there. Days, weeks. At some point, I reached a sentence that felt like the last one. I paused. My hand trembled. My palm was dry. My blood had run out. The page waited. So did the librarian. I looked up. "What happens now?" I asked. It leaned forward. "You begin again." And then everything went black. I woke up in a library. Not the archive. Not the white void. A public library. Warm. Clean. Somewhere unfamiliar. Children giggled in the distance. People browsed shelves. I sat at a study desk, a book in front of me. It was grey. Not leather-bound, just a grey hardcover. Plain. I opened it. The first page read, "The Librarian Has No Eyes," by Ezra March, and the dedication beneath it said, "To Marian, I bought your time, use it well." I closed the book, tears slipping silently down my face. No one around me seemed to notice. I rose and walked out of the library. Weeks passed. I rented a small apartment in the city. I tried to live. I couldn't read anything anymore, not even street signs. The words would shift and slither, letters twisting into forgotten tongues. But I remembered how to cook, how to smile, how to breathe. Sometimes, I saw reflections that didn't match me. Sometimes, I heard voices in the sound between turning pages, but I ignored them. Then, one day, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a notebook, plain, spiral-bound. I opened it. It was Marian's handwriting. Just one entry. I made it out. I don't know how, but I remember everything. Thank you. And below it, another sentence, hastily scrawled. "You're not free, Ezra. It's reading you now." I dropped the notebook. The lights in the room flickered, and from behind me, I heard the turning of pages. Then silence. And then, reader,